Hey guys, Mike here with EBR, and you're looking at the Velotric Nomad 1 Plus. Now, it's a fat tire e-bike. It's got a punchy 750 watt rear hub motor, a front suspension fork, and they promise up to 55 miles of range. So this bike will check a lot of boxes for a lot of folks. But stick around and let's talk about some of its strengths. We'll see if there's any areas for improvement, and more importantly, we'll see if this is the right e-bike for you. All right, so the Velotric Nomad 1 Plus, it is a class 3 e-bike, meaning it can take you to 28 miles an hour on pedal assist, and there is a throttle as well. Now, its MSRP is $1,399, and it is UL 2849 certified. Now, the bike has a big max capacity or max payload of 440 pounds. That's one of the highest I've seen yet. And the bike itself weighs about 74.5 pounds the way it sits. Now that's including the 9-pound battery. So should you remove that battery, the bike's about 65 pounds when it's stripped of that battery. Now the bike comes in 2 frame configurations. Here we have the high step, but there's also a step through model that has an entry point down here, which is nice if you're concerned about stability or just want that easy on and off access that you get with a step through frame. Now the frames come in 2 colors. This is the forest green, but there's also a gray color that they call indigo gray. Now, when it comes to sizing, the step-through model that we don't have, that one fits riders 5'1" all the way up to 6'4", and this high step fits riders from 5'6" all the way up to 6'9". Now, I'm 5'11", and it fit me just fine when I was riding all week with plenty of room in either direction. Some geometry numbers for this high step. It has a 47-inch wheelbase, so that's from rear hub up to front hub. It has a standover height here of 30.7 inches. It has a reach of 16 inches, and you can adjust this seat post from around 32 inches all the way up to about 40 inches. So lots of room to play with your fit. And then you have an adjustable stem up front to kind of really dial in a reach that works for you. Now, when they chose tires and wheels, they went with a 26-inch wheel. It's a black alloy wheel with stainless steel spokes. Now they chose to wrap this in a CST tire, and it's sized at 26 by 4 inches, so a nice 4-inch wide tire. And this is their CST BFT, which has a knobby tread pattern, not super aggressive, but enough to give you traction both on and off pavement. Now they say to run these at up to 30 PSI. Personally, I found that low 20s, even upper teens in some cases, is a really nice sweet spot. It almost feels like you're adding suspension to the rear because it has room for a lot of cush in the fat tire. And that is one of the nice features about getting something like a fat tire, is running a slightly lower PSI and then getting that cushion that the rubber can provide. Now, when it comes to fenders, they did put fenders on the front and rear. I do like the fact that they went with plastic fenders. Plastic fenders can take more of a beating than an alloy or a steel fender, and steel or metal fenders tend to rattle a bit more, and the plastic ones can not only take more abuse, but they tend to be quieter on the road, which I'm always a fan of. Now, when it comes to racks, the bike is able to take both a rear rack and a front basket with mounting points for each. And then you also have another set of mounting points here on the down tube should you want to add a water bottle cage or a toolkit, something along those lines. Now, when it comes to lighting, they did put a front headlight on this bike and a rear taillight that also doubles as the brake light. Now, that front headlight is rated at 60 lux, and it's plenty bright in both daytime and nighttime usage. Daytime mostly to be seen, and then nighttime to see. Now, when it comes to the motor and battery selection for the Nomad 1 Plus, they went with a rear hub motor. Now, this rear hub motor is rated at 750 watts and has a torque rating of 75 Newton meters. Now, I've been riding this bike all over town, both on and off-road, and I found that this motor is programmed, in my opinion, really well. It's punchy when you need it at higher speeds, so things like picking up acceleration, getting up over hills. That's 75 Newton meters of torque with this 750 watts really do perform well together. But there's another area that I appreciate, and that is the acceleration. It's not super fast off the line, but I think for a lot of folks, that's a good thing. Sometimes e-bikes can be a little too aggressive off the launch or off the start, and it can catch you off guard, it can throw off your balance, or just kind of startle you in general. This has more of a measured acceleration, and then when you need it at higher ends, when you're up over 10, 15 miles an hour, the acceleration is very good. So it lets you gradually get up to a good acceleration without overdoing it on the front end. So just something to think about if that's the kind of motor you would appreciate. Now, it has 5 levels of pedal assist, and it also is activated by a cadence sensor. This cadence sensor activates within about quarter to a half a turn. It seems responsive, and like I said, the power is measured and when it's given to you, but it's not overbearing, and it's super capable. I was actually impressed with the climbing and speed ability of this bike. Now, the battery on this bike is a 48-volt battery. As you can see here, it is removable. It comes with a key, and I'll show you how to remove that battery. So right here, there's a keyhole on it with a lock and unlock display diagram. So I'll put the key in. I'll just turn it to the unlock, and that will release the battery. Now, when you remove this, it's a little tight in here. So I take out the front first, and then I pick up the rear so I can slide it out that way, because otherwise you'll kind of clang in and out of these bars. But this battery is UL 2849 certified. It does have a 2-year warranty along with the entire bike. And this has 14.4 amp hours and giving it a total of 691 watt hours. Now for range, they say this will get up to 55 miles. And real quick, I'll show you how to put this back in. I put the bottom in first, let it sit, and then I snap the top back in, and you can pull the key right out. So back to what I was saying about range, they say this bike will get up to 55 miles. Now we conducted 2 range tests. We did one at the lowest PAS and the highest. So the lowest PAS, we got 52 miles, so right up against that 55-mile expectation. And then when it came to PAS 5, the fastest, we got 26 miles, excuse me, 26 miles, not 36, which is also a very good score when you consider that's going around 20 miles an hour the whole time. So all in all, good numbers for range and good performance in range department. So let's talk about the component lineup that Velotric used on the Nomad 1 Plus. They went with an 8-gear or 8-speed setup, and that's a Shimano Altus 8-speed rear derailleur, a 13 to 43 tooth rear cassette, and a 48 tooth chainring up front mated to 170 millimeter crank arms with flat black plastic pedals that do have some raised studs for traction and reflectors for visibility. Now the range of that 13 to 43 rear cassette and 48 tooth chainring is a pretty solid range. I've rode it in varied terrain and elevation changes, and it performed well pretty much every scenario. I never felt like I needed more or less, especially with an e-bike where you have power on demand when you need it. But all in all, solid range selection and no issues with the drivetrain. Now the braking setup for the Nomad 1 Plus is hydraulic disc brakes, which I'm always a fan of seeing. And they decided to use 180 millimeter rotors with a 1.8 millimeter thickness mated to 2 piston calipers. Now the only caveat on these brakes are that they're unbranded, so I can't speak to longevity or servicing of them, but I can say they look very typical of almost any other hydraulic disc brake setup you'll see, so I don't think it'd be too difficult to get them serviced. I just don't know about longevity. Now I can say in performance areas, I used them all week, everything from a lot of sudden stops, just testing how they performed under pressure, and then lots of everyday slowing down, stopping at lights, things like that. And they always worked really well. It was always confident, it was controllable, and I never felt like I needed more in the braking department. Now, moving up to the saddle choice, we do have an alloy seat post that is rigid, no suspension there, and then their Velotric Ergonomic Comfort saddle. Now, when I saw this saddle, I thought it looked fairly bland like any other saddle on a bike, but I will say in riding it all week, I was pretty initially surprised at how comfortable it was. And normally when you get a wide, padded, comfortable seat, it detracts from the ability to pedal well. But in this case, they have a narrow enough center that it wasn't digging into my inner thighs or my hamstrings, and you could still have a comfortable seat, but still effectively pedal, which is always a nice thing. Now, when it comes to suspension on this bike, they did go with a front suspension fork. Now, this fork has 80 millimeters of travel on it, plus it has a nice lockout option right here. Hitting that will lock the fork out if you don't feel like using it, and then a simple switch back and you have your travel back. All in all, the fork feels good. It's nice for things like curbs and potholes and just everyday bumps, especially on an off-road trail or even a light trail. It just eats up those vibrations really well. Plus with the 4-inch tires and the seat, it's definitely comfortable overall. Now, when it comes to the cockpit here, we have an alloy 700 millimeter wide bar with a 31.8 center for the stem clamp. On both sides, we have lock-on ergonomic black rubber grips that are nice platforms to put your hands on. All in all, they're comfortable, and I like the fact that they're lock-on. They don't slide or move off over time. Over here, you have, on both sides, you have your brake levers. You have your Shimano Altus 8-speed trigger shifters with window to see what gear you're in. In the center, we have a display and our headlight. And over here, we have our push throttle plus our PAS control buttons and display controls. And your obligatory bell for any bike you get these days. So all in all, a nice clean setup. I will say they did a pretty good job of cleaning up the wires. They use these cable control or cable housings here that kind of just tighten everything up and make it nice and clean. It's not internally routed, but it's also not disorganized or jumbled up front. All in all, a super clean and functional cockpit. All right, so here in the display, we have a duotone display. You turn on the bike by holding the power button, and that will bring on the display here. And this is your home screen setup. So you have your current miles per hour, your current battery level, your odometer, and your pedal assist levels that, as you adjust here on the left side by going up and down, you'll see on the display. Now, should you want to go into a couple tweakable settings, they have only a few on this one. So you'll hold the plus and minus together for just a second. Here you can change the speed limit on the bike. So it's currently set at 28 or a class 3, but let's say you're new to biking in general, or maybe your kids or grandkids are gonna ride your bike and you're just a little concerned and you wanna make sure things are a little bit more controlled. You can simply dial down that top speed to something that makes you more comfortable, and then you can simply hit the power button and that'll send you to the next option, but to set that when it does so. So the next option will be changing the units from miles per hour to kilometers per hour. And then you have resetting the display altogether, and here you can change the backlight sensitivity or display brightness. Here it's at the max brightness right now, which is actually very easy to see in direct sunlight, so it's plenty bright. To exit these advanced settings, you hold plus and minus again, and you're back to your home screen. Now, Velotric in general does have apps for their bikes, but it's not on all models, and this probably being more of a value prop bike, this one does not have app connectivity, but all in all, the display is functional, simple, and practical to use. All right, guys, so that wraps up me yapping about all the specs and components. Let me go grab my helmet and we'll take this out on the road and we'll hit some little bit of off-road, a little bit of on-road, and we'll just talk about how the motor feels, how it rides, and just some overall initial impressions when you're doing some real world riding. All right, guys, we're out here on the Velotric Nomad 1 Plus. And the geometry on this, or the riding position on it, so it's upright and it's super comfortable. That's just kind of right out the gate. It's upright and comfortable. However, there's a caveat there, and that is that it has this adjustable stem down here. And if I wanted to, I could lower this stem more forward and kind of give myself a bit more of an aggressive riding position. But the way we have it now is more upright. It's really just a very casual, relaxed ride, and it's kind of nice in that aspect. But should you want to get more leaned forward, you could certainly do so by using the adjustable stem. So overall, it feels really good, and I think a lot of that has to do with not only the front suspension fork, but you have 4-inch wide tires, these 26x4 CST branded tires. It's their BFT series with kind of a mild knobby tread pattern, not a full-on like big chunky treads, but there's knobbies there. They're just kind of mild knobbies, kind of a versatile all-terrain type tread pattern on them. But then the kind of X factor for the comfort here is the seat. There's no suspension seat post. There's no big wide platform seat. It's just the basic seat that came with it. They call it their Velotric. I think they call it their ergonomic comfort saddle. Whatever they call it, it's definitely very comfortable, and it's one of the more comfortable just stock factory seats I've ridden. But a good part of it is sometimes when they're wide and big and plush and comfortable, you kind of don't feel great when you pedal. Your inner thighs or your hamstrings are kind of rubbing up against that wider saddle. But this gets narrow enough towards the front that you can still pedal very comfortably, and the bike, you get a comfortable saddle, but you also get comfortable pedaling, which those two are not always happening at the same time, so it's kind of nice in this case. The motor on this is the rear hub motor at 750 watts. And it's activated by a cadence sensor. So a cadence sensor basically can sense the fact that you've rotated the pedals by initiating a cadence of pedaling, and then that tells it to send power to the motor. And cadence sensors can vary based on how they're programmed, how many magnets they have, for how quick they initiate and how quick they sense your pedaling. So let's do a quick test and see how fast we get the cadence sensor to kick on the motor. So I'm just going to start from a dead stop and right now pedal. So right just shy of half a turn. So not a full 360. Yeah, less than half a turn. Anything in my book from that inside a half a turn, quarter to half a turn, is usually a pretty solid result, pretty quick response time. Now, one thing that's nice about the motor is the 75 Newton meters of torque. Now, torque ratings and motors can have all sorts of specs, but they don't always feel like they live up to the spec. And some of you may know what I'm talking about, where you get a bike that maybe has a massive torque rating or a massive motor rating, and then you ride it and you're like, well, it's kind of under-delivering, underperforming, or it just doesn't feel like it should. This one feels very strong for 750 watts and 75 Newton meters. I've hit a couple hills, and it really does start to peak higher and give you that push you need to get up hills without any problems. So the motor feels nice. The cadence sensor is sufficient, you know, for what it is. No problems there. And the front fork here, it's got a lockout option. It's also got 80 millimeters to travel. It feels all right. It's a pretty standard, you know, factory fork. But all in all, I'd say the saddle, fork, and geometry team up to make the whole ride, especially with the 4-inch wide tires. It just all becomes really comfortable all together. Now the brakes on here are unbranded, but they are hydraulic disc brakes with 2-piston calipers and 180 millimeter rotors. I'm gonna get up to speed here, I don't know, around 20 miles an hour, and just see how they feel when we come to, I'm gonna do kind of an abrupt stop. Something that you would maybe encounter, something unplanned. Somebody jumps out. Now, I don't know if you heard that when I accelerated, but the motor, when you're riding, doesn't really have any noise. It's kind of quiet. I think I hear more from the tire, the knobby tires. But when I accelerate or try to pick up speed pretty quick, you do hear that motor make a little noise just as it's, you know, spooling up to give you that power. But let's get going a little bit faster, and then we will hit these brakes. Man, this bike is punchy. It's quick. Kind of fun. So here we are at about 20, and I'm gonna stop right now. So pretty good. I'd say it was a little longer than I expected. It was still certainly a safe stopping distance, but I think that's something I need to remember anytime when we have a bike that is, you know, in that 70-pound range, and you have 4-inch wide tires that are big and heavy, so it's a lot to bring to a stop. But even in a unannounced short stop, kind of under pressure like that, still performed really well. The modularity on them is good. They seem really good for this size and weight of the bike. They're performing well. Now, unbranded, I don't know how long they'll last. I don't know about servicing them. I will say, though, they look pretty standard for hydraulic disc brakes, and you most likely shouldn't have any issues getting this serviced over time. But initial impressions are all really good. Now, when you ride this, you have 5 pedal assist modes, and the bike can go up to 28 miles an hour, but you have the option to go into the display and you can limit that at the full 28, or you can actually bring that down to a number you specify, even as low as 20 or even lower, to kind of dictate and control that speed. But at PAS1, I noticed that it's programmed to hover kind of around that 11 to 12 mile an hour mark. You'll see it creep up to 12 here. Oh, 13. Okay, so 13 in PAS1. Let's go to level 2. And there you go, you hear that kick on. And that's gonna hover right around upper 15s, right at 16. Let's go to level 3. And here we're gonna get to about 19.6, 20. Level 4. I will say here at 22 miles an hour, I'm kind of ghost pedaling. I'm not getting, well, I'm not ghost pedaling. I've got some tension there. So here we're stopping it around. So if you guys notice, I went up a little hill there and it just jams right up it. That torque is really good on this. Sorry guys, I'm not a Formula One racer here. I don't really know how to get past 28 in these corners. Let me get to a straightaway. It's cornering nicely. It feels really balanced. It feels easy to ride. It's kind of relatively, you know, they throw this term around a lot in biking, but confidence inspiring. And I think a lot of that has to do with these huge tires. It just makes you feel like you can't really go wrong. If you hit something, it's not going to jostle your front end. It's not going to make you unsteady. But let's get this thing up to speed. So in level 4 here, we've got 22. 23 is going to be the cap there, 22.9. And level 5, $28. Slow that down. So it's definitely a punchy motor. It's quick, it's peppy. I kind of really like that. If you're in an area with hills, this would be the kind of bike that would have no trouble getting you up and over those hills. It doesn't feel like it's struggling on hills, which is a really nice thing. Let's check out this throttle here and see what it goes to. So from a dead stop, we'll just see where we go. A little sluggish off the start, which is surprising because it's so punchy everywhere else. But we're quickly up to 20. And it looks like 27.5 is going to be the ceiling for the throttle. I think the frame feels nice and sturdy. You know, it's a high step, so you don't have any of that flex of a step through. But yeah, all in all, this is a good bike for, it'd be a good like camping and exploring bike, something to get around town. You got nice big fenders on here to prevent mud and dirt and water from hitting you. It'd be a good just kind of exploring bike. I wouldn't say this is going to be much of a, I mean, it could be a commuter. You've got mounts here for a front basket rack and a rear rack. So you could certainly make it a commuter. But all in all, I'd say with the fork and the fenders, it's just built to go ride and explore. You know, you can get off-road in this, and it's just going to feel fine. In fact, let's get a little faster on this dirt. I mean, we're just jamming 25 miles an hour on gravel. Even with those bumps, yeah, it's just a really, it's a fun, capable bike. And at the price point it's at, it's not gonna, you know, totally break the bank. With the adjustable stem, you've got some flexibility in how you wanna ride. I'd say all in all, it's doing well. So let's go talk to Ben, our mechanic, and get his thoughts on it, and then we'll wrap up this review. All right, guys, we're out here again with Ben, our in-house mechanic, to talk about his kind of likes and things to improve on the Velotric Nomad. Ben, I'm gonna get out of your way, let you do it, but thank you to Feedback Sports for supplying us with their HD Pro rack. It's aluminum, super durable, and even does well with these heavier e-bikes in them. And they have a full lineup of tools. So if you like to tinker on your bikes like we do, we'll leave a link down in the description. You can check out Feedback Sports. So Ben, I'll let you take it away. We'll just kind of kick it off with what you like about the bike.
All right, Mike, thanks. There's a lot to like. This bike is pretty sweet. One thing that's notable, I think, you don't see on a lot of bikes, is an offset drilling pattern for the spokes in the rim. What does that mean? You can see that they're spaced not down the center of the rim, but to the sides. That just means the rim and overall bike feel is going to be more stable. You have a wider footprint. I really like seeing that. As far as the fork and the wheel are concerned, this is a threaded axle. I like seeing that. Maybe it's a little less expensive, maybe not as easy to get the wheel out, but it's a stronger fitting than a quick release lever, standard quick release. So you get a lot of front end stability. I really like that. As a mechanic, it's always nice to see a threadless fork and stem setup on these things. A, for stability, and B, because every bike shop is going to have parts if you choose to get a different stem, or if down the road you have to do any work on your fork or replace it. Those are great parts. With the Velotric bikes, you can see by the bottom bracket, they've got this big aluminum cavern here. This is where the controller is housed. For a mechanic like me, that makes it super easy to pop the cap off the non-drive side of the bike, access the controller, change the wiring, check the wiring for that matter. It's a nice waterproof sealed setup. I really like that one. Plastic fenders. I always like plastic fenders. A, they're lighter. B, you can hit them and you can bang them against the walls. They don't dent, they don't chip, they don't have dings in them. Super nice, really light. It's a great thing to have. As far as the riding position is concerned, I really do like the under the bar rapid fire shifter. Some of the bikes will come with an over the top of the bar thumb shifter, which is really hard to use and get your thumb to make that thing work. So that just looks good, very easy to use. And I will always appreciate a micro adjust seat post rather than some of them use a really old seat rail clamp system. So those are the likes for me on this bike, Mike.
Awesome, man. And what kind of things would you improve on this bike?
You know, it's a lot the same as what I'll comment about, and they're using a square taper bottom bracket spindle. This is a big enough bike, it's a heavy enough bike, it's going to accommodate a big enough rider. A bigger, beefier, hollow, oversized spindle in the bottom bracket would be a good idea. I think it just bodes well for a bigger rider or more aggressive. I think a two-piece chainring would suit this bike well too, and the reason for that is it'll just be easier to replace and service if this chainring does get bent or need to be replaced. What I found also, the rear brake light cable routing is underneath and inside the fender here. Why is that bad? Well, it's hard to access, for one, because you've got to remove the wheel to get to it. Secondly, if you run over a stick or some debris in the road and the tire catches it and puts it through the fender, there is a chance, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there is a chance that that stick or debris will get in there and cut that cord. And then you've got to replace the cord, the wheel comes out, and it just becomes a little bit more of a pain. Routing it externally would just be a really easy way to go about that.
Awesome, man. Thanks very much, Ben.
All right, thanks, Mike.
So overall, the Velotric Nomad 1 Plus, it's a good balance of power capability, but also value at this $13.99 price point. It's going to be great for those who want a fat tire e-bike, maybe they're considering commuting with it, but still want the ability to go on maybe a weekend adventure and not lose or sacrifice comfort and range in the process. So if that's the kind of bike you're looking for, this should definitely be on your short list and worth a look. If you want to take a look, I'll put a link down in the description so you can check it out yourself. And while you're here, if you guys haven't done so already, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. And until the next review, I'll see you guys out on the trail.